All right, it's week 5. We're 5 weeks in. It's good to see you all. Some exciting things for today. On the board, we'll have some question and answer, space for dialogue. We'll go into a little bit of pronunciation practice. And then we'll continue learning the self-introduction we've been learning on. So just practicing that, working on our pronunciation, and just adding a couple new lines every time we work on it. So before we kick off, what questions do folks have? Last week, our homework was to practice the new lines of our knock-knock dialogue. During the day, we had practiced some pronunciation, getting those underlined Ks, those underlined Xs, saying hat tin, working on tones. And so how did that go for folks? Or any other questions you have so far about class? Well, this won't be your only opportunity, so if you do have questions, don't be shy, you can ask during class. With that, we'll go into some of our pronunciation review. These are some of the sounds we worked on last week. And since we had the weekend to rest, let's go ahead and practice them again. And so the first one, the word means yes when it has a high tone at the end. And so practice the high tone on that last A. So it sounds, so repeat after me. Ah.
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 Geez.
Ah.
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 Yeah, that sounds good. I can hear you go ah. So you're making a high tone on that last A. Next word I want to practice is one that we had some questions on last Thursday. And the questions were really good. They were mostly around how to chunk the sounds because you have some underlined Ks, you have an underlined X, you have a long vowel, and then you have a short high tone vowel. So since that can be a lot of information to take in at once, we had some questions about how to chunk this. And after class, Shaksani Kik and I had a discussion, and she asked me to remind folks that the middle syllable is hua. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, repeat after me. Hua. Okay. Since the underlined X is rounded, meaning it has a W after it, she wanted to make sure that we practice that as one sound rather than separating the h and the w. So let's repeat after me, nice and slow. Hua tin. Okay. So what I like is that I'm hearing you guys are making the ah long, whereas the and the I are short, and that's just how it should be. So one more time, take a sip of water if you need. Underlined letters require you to be pretty hydrated to make the sounds. And when I'm starting out, I like to be able to really enunciate them. So after me, Kuhwatin.
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 Okay, sound good. Last point for pronunciation review is something that we sort of closed class on last Thursday. And it was quite an eye-opener for myself because tones are something that I've had to work on ever since I started learning Lingit. And in English, we have a tendency to inflect our voices. And so whether we're making a point or asking a question, we'll inflect at the end. So do you have plans for tomorrow? As like an example of how we inflect our voice. And Shaksani Keek shared with me that that's different from pronouncing a high tone. And so something that we want to differentiate is, for example, in the phrase tu, you can hear that tu is high tone, but it's not quite the same as inflection. So it doesn't sound like tu or tu. And so this is just something we'll do as we kind of close the gap between our very beginning understanding of tones to kind of making it sound more natural based off the knowledge that's shared with us by our elders. So go ahead and repeat after me. Hadoshtu.
Kaduhtu.
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 Kaduhtu. Kaduhtu.
Okay. One more time. Hadoshtu.
Kaduhtu.
Two.
Two.
Kaduhtu. Kaduhtu.
Okay. Any questions about these words or sounds before we move on?
What does yagay mean?
Okay. It means it's good.
Okay, it's
Yeah.
a.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Any more questions on that? Edna?
Could you describe the inflection again? I'm sorry, there's somebody knocking at my door, so
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
Okay. I'll wait for you to get back. Does anyone else have a question? So the main difference between a high tone and inflection is the way your voice sounds. Like when I think of inflection, it's kind of like at the end of a sentence, or the way Shaksani Keek described when you're little and you tell a story and you want to drive home each point, or like I just did, drive home each point, you're kind of raising your voice gradually. And a high tone is, you'll compare the high tone with the low tone. So for example, if you look at the phrase tu, I kind of think of the difference as being like, these are low, and so comparatively, the tu is going to be higher. It's like a cheerful sound. So the correct way to pronounce this would be tu. Whereas like I'm guilty of this sometimes too. When I'm practicing high tones and starting out, I might say tu or tu, where it's just like a little bit too much. And it kind of sounds like it's raising up as you would in an English question. Does that make sense to you guys? Seeing some head nods.
To me, it reinforces the idea that I need to take my time and figure out the syllables. I really do like the SHI games application because it's a word and a little clip that has just that word in it, but I can look at the spelling and hear the sound.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that with us. Yeah, we'll get more into games and kind of just continue this pattern of reading along while we're listening to the natural sounds of the language, because it's so important. Sometimes when I watch video recordings of elders speaking, I'll just, if nothing else, I'll take away the intonation and the rhythm and the cadence of how they talk, because those are the authentic sounds of the language. Disc. Oh, you're muted.
Whoops, my bad. Oh, I was just gonna say that in Spanish, a lot of times when you want to ask a question, you say a statement, but you inflect at the end. So you'd say, instead of, saying you have a red cat, you'd say you have a red cat, and it's like a big, like you make a big emphasis on the at the end. I just think it's fascinating. This is the opposite of that. You do not do that, like, as far as I can tell, ever. So I just think that's a really interesting and obviously important distinction. Just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, goodness cheese. That's a really good point, because each language will handle tones and inflection differently. And personally, like a funny story about myself, at one point in my life, I was driving a whale watching boat, and I would have to narrate what we were seeing, like talking about the puffins while I'm driving the boat. And because it was kind of nerve-wracking, some of the feedback I got was that my voice was too monotone. And so since that, I had kind of like self-consciousness around it, and I would purposefully try to inflect my voice all the time. And so now I think I have a little bit of unnatural intonation where I overdo it. But I'm on my own path of speaking and all of that. So good cheese for the distinction.
So you have a public speaking intonation thing going on that you're combining now too.
Yeah, I tend to
tough.
overdo it, because the comment card I got was like, she's so monotone. I got tired of listening to her. And I was like embarrassed about it. So
Whatever.
yeah. Okay, Edna, did you come back? Did you catch our conversation?
I did come back and I caught most of it. Thank you. They were delivering some meds, so I had to get that. Sorry for the interruption. I'm still trying to figure out the difference, because how do you know if you have an inflection sentence or whatever syllable? How do you know that you would change the tone of your voice?
Oh yeah. Okay, that's a good question. Thank you for bringing that up. A distinction I want to share about the Lingit language is that when you ask a question in Lingit, you will not inflect your voice at the end of the sentence the way you will in English. And so this is something that was shared with me in beginning, and I want to pass it on because the way you mark a question might come in the middle of the sentence, but it's marked with a word. And so we'll get into question words, but one of our phrases in our dialogue has Yesuga Lingit Siku, or Yesuga Lingit Siku. Yesuga Siku Lingit. And the question marker is in the word ge. And so that high tone comes in the middle, but I wouldn't say Yesuga Siku Lingit. So that's one example where it's like a incorrect use of inflection, where you won't do that in Lingit. And this can be a lot just to talk about without looking at examples. So what I'll do is, as we move forward, I'll kind of point them out in our examples and in our dialogues.
Anna,
Mhm.
when you say wasa kuati, you don't raise the last part. That's what you're saying, right? You're just keeping it pretty. Okay. All right. I got it. Thank you.
So for example, the question Sani just shared, wasa kuati. Kuati in that form is long and low. So even though it's a question, it's important that kuati is low tone. And so the high tones are in was and sa. So you'll have like high tone, low tone, low tone, low tone. Wasa kuati. Good examples. And we'll continue to work on this and to point it out as we practice our self-introductions and our dialogue. You have a question? Okay. So revisiting our self-introduction. Last week, we started with 2 lines, and what we'll do is introduce 2 lines at a time. So the first 2 lines are just talking about our names. In English, I am called blank, and in Lingit, I'm called blank. So for example, my first 2 lines might be Lingit or I would say and so instead of Lingit for my name, I would say because my family is Khoisan Athabaskan, and so I use the Lingit word for Athabaskan, which is Qunana. If you come from another Alaska Native nation, for example, if you have a Yuchtan name or a Nipak name or Unangan name, I can help you look up those words too, because Tlingit has ways to describe other nations. So are there any questions on these first 2 lines?
I'm having a bit of trouble with the Ainak.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind saying that one a few more times for me, please?
Yeah. So when I'm learning a new word, how to pronounce it, if it has a couple challenging sounds for me, I'll chunk it one piece at a time. So let's start with the last syllable, the N, high tone A, underline X. Everybody repeat after me. Nach.
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 Nach,
Nach.
nach,
Nach.
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 Okay. Yeah, keep it nice and short.
Nach.
Okay, nach. And what I like is that the underlined X is not pinched, which is correct for this. It's nach.
Nach.
Now, if you look at the first syllable, it's underlined X pinched, which is marked with that apostrophe, and then high tone EI. So the way you'll pronounce the first syllable, repeat after me. A.
A.
A. A.
A.
A.
A.
A.
A.
That's how you pronounce the vowel A. Now that pinched underline X. So start off just making an underline X that's not pinched. Take a sip of water if you need to. It's kind of a gurgly sound. And it's important that you hear that gravelly friction. So try again. You should kind of feel it in the back of your throat. Now you're going to pinch it. And so I'm going to say it with the vowels so that it'll come through clear to you. But when you pinch it, you kind of close your teeth on it and squeeze out the air.
Okay.
So repeat after me. A.
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 Let's do the whole phrase because I think Zoom is cutting off that first sound. So the whole phrase, repeat after me. Late einach.
Late. Ka. Enach.
Let's call in
Great cock. Geen nacht.
There you go. That one was good. Sometimes what will happen as we start to learn Lingit is that underlined X's and pinch underlined X's will accidentally get turned to K's, or a sound that's easier and more familiar to English speakers. But what I really want to encourage you to do is enter that space where you're making an unfamiliar sound if it's unfamiliar to you, and spending some time with it. Slow it down if you need to, and practice it throughout the day. And so, for example, when I was learning Japanese, one of our dialogues we had to memorize was McDonald's. You had to say McDonald's in Japanese, and it's like really long, and it's makudonarudo. But when I heard the tape saying it, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't say that. So I had to slow it down. I remember one time I spent a whole morning practicing saying makudonarudo, just one little syllable at a time. And I highly encourage that practice for learning Lingit, because you train your mind and your mouth to make those sounds. It's like building a new muscle and a new neurological pathway. So keep with it. I encourage you to make the sounds. And so let's do it. Let's do it one more time. Like einach.
Late. Ka. Enach.
Late.
Great.
Einach.
Great.
Geen
Geen nacht.
Late.
Geen nacht.
Einach.
A.
Geen nacht.
Okay. Okay, I'm hearing a lot of improvement. Was there a question? Did I see somebody unmute to ask a question? Okay. The next one is your space to say what you're called in Lingit, or if you're at the Baskin, what you're called in Gonana, or if you're Simshian, what you're called in Suitskhan, or if you're Haida, what you're called in Dekina. But it would be Lingit, or in my case, Qonana, Einach, Nila Torah, Yuchat Duasak. So let's practice the second half of that phrase. So the part that means I am called is Yuchat Duasak. So repeat after me. Yuchat Duasak.
Yuchat duasak.
Duasak.
Yuchat duasak.
You cut to a sock.
Okay. Just a
Yuchat.
reminder on that last K, since it has a W after it, it's not its own syllable, but what that W, the KW at the end of duasak tells you to do is to round your lips. So you breathe out the K sound with your lips rounded. So it'll sound like duasak.
Duasak.
Okay.
Duasak.
Okay.
To a sock.
Does anybody want to try? We won't do breakout rooms today, but does anybody want to try the first line on their own? So for mine, it would be Leit Kaj Einach and Yuchat Duasak. I won't put you on the spot, but if you want to try, you can raise your hand or put your raise hand function. Shawat Kidan.
I don't know how to raise my hand, but I'll try it.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Leika chanach yutua yuchat duasauk.
Okay.
Something I'm confused about is the K and the underlined K and the underlined X almost sound the same the way I'm saying them.
Mhm.
Chanach.
Mhm.
Chanach.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're close. So like you said, the underlined K, they're both going to be, you'll feel it in the back of your throat when you're pronouncing it. And I can even see it when I look in the mirror. If I say ha, I can see my voice box moving. Whereas if I say ka without an underline, I don't see it as much. So the difference between the underlined K and the underlined X is that the K will be, it'll sound like ka. It will be an acute sound, whereas the ha is like a fricative. You're just creating friction and it'll sound like gravel rolling around. So,
Tish.
So it would sound like leit ka einach. Okay, Shawat Kedan, I see your hand is raised. I couldn't hear you before. Let me try hearing you again. I still don't hear you. Let's try Kanasat, and then we'll come back to you, Shawat Kedan.
Okay, I took a drink so I could try.
Okay.
Late cha einak kanasat yuchat duasauk.
That's really good, but you gave us your Lingit name, so that goes in the next line, babe.
Oh yeah.
So yours, I guess we would say Alicia.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to try again?
Okay. Late cha einak Alicia yuchat duasauk.
Okay. And then the next one, do your Lingit name now. Lingit Einach.
Lingit chenak kanasat. You hat dua sauk.
Okay. You had to a sock. It's good.
You hat dua sauk.
Yeah, bingo.
Gunat chish.
Shawat Kedan, I still don't hear you. Do you have a Bluetooth device plugged in or something like that? Okay, Askutuyak Shah.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
So in the word Tlingit, so I know in English it's TL, and so we do the with the T, but if you're pronouncing it Tlingit in Tlingit, it's the L is right, so it's Tlingit. You don't do the TL sound. Like if you're reading it in English, it makes sense that you try to pronounce TL with the, but that's actually not the. Is that not actually the how you pronounce it in Tlingit? I'm just hearing different things. So do you have? Thank you.
Yeah.
Buenos dias.
That's a good question. And so this has come up quite a few times in René's classes. And I like the way he describes it in the language, in Tlingit, the way you say human being is Tlingit. And so when English speakers came to Alaska and asked people, how do you call yourselves? And if they said Tlingit, English speakers would write it down the best they could, and they came up with TL, which over time in English sort of became a K. People would say Tlingit. But in the language, it's written as an L, which is a voiceless L, and you just say Tlingit. And that's actually a different sound from what you'll hear when you have a TL together, like in the word chat for halibut, you can hear that little t before the chat. So yeah, just an L in Tlingit.
Hello.
Seki?
No question. I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. Sani?
Could you listen to me? Yes, I have a hard time. Well, I won't say which part I have a hard time with. I'm just going to go ahead and say the 2 lines before you move on. So, glate ka glena liana you hat duasau trinket glena sani you hat duasau. Can you hear that W sound at the end of duasau? That's the one I'm having trouble with.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I can hear it when you say it, and your intonation sounds good too. You had to wasak.
Goodness cheese.
Okay.
I'll try it.
Okay.
Great cut enough Henry. Yachat duasauk. Klingit. Kina. Kina. Yedi duftin. Yachat duasauk.
Okay. Goodness cheese. That was good. I like the way you said Einach. All right, well, proud of you guys. we'll continue to work on these. And so those are the first 2 lines. All right, today we're adding 2 new lines to our self-introduction. And this is how we'll work on our introduction to begin with. Over time, people, as they learn what houses they're from, or they want to personalize their introduction, they'll start to change it up. But Shaksani Keek and I talk, and we would like you to stick to these lines to begin with, primarily because we want you to practice the sounds. There's a lot of underlined X's in them, and we want you to become familiar with these verb patterns. And so this is how we'll do for now. So the way your clans will work in this introduction format is you'll say your mother's clan, and that's what clan you are. And then you'll say your father's clan, which is the clan you're the child of. And so I'm Khoi Clan Athabaskan, but on my mother's side, looking at it through the Lingit lens, I'm English American. I'm Ingenen Kwan. And so when I introduce myself in this lens, I say Ingenen Kwan Nachetsiti. I am English. And so we can identify differently for those of us who are mixed heritage. Maybe we have one native parent and one non-native parent. It depends on you and how you want to uplift your ancestors and how you want to voice that you connect with your ancestral land. And so when I look at this through a native lens, I'm like, okay, my mom is English American. And so I'm going to honor that on my mom's side, we come from England. And on my dad's side, we're Glenana, we're Athabaskan. And so through the Tlingit lens, I would be Ingenen Kwan Nachat City, Glenana Yeti Ayechat. And so let's practice the phrase Nachat City. So go ahead and repeat after me. City.
Nachhatsati.
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 So since we have 2 underlined X's right next to each other, what it'll sound like is a space in between them. And so start off with just the last 2 words. Khat City.
Chatsati.
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 Okay.
Chatsati.
Chatsati. Now say just the first word. Nach.
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 Okay. Nach.
Nach.
And so when you have 2 underlined X's next to each other, like you see in the end of Nach and the beginning of Chat, what you're gonna do is make space, but that's all it is. So the space is a sound in the phrase. So it'll sound like this. Nach Chatsati.
Nach City.
Nach.
Chatsati.
Nach.
Yeah, that sounds good. Such you have a question?
I thought that someone had wanted the dialogue in the chat. So I typed it in as a direct message. Maybe we could do that.
Oh yeah, Gunnar Cheech. Thank you for helping me with that. Okay. I'm gonna put
Gunjish. Sakat. Like.
Ah,
okay, I'm putting the first 2 lines and then the next 2 lines. Okay. Okay, so those lines are in the chat. Disc. Oh, you're muted.
I keep blowing my hand and thinking I've unmuted myself. My bad. In that phrase, the naksat sati, how do you how much of a separation do you want to have between like the X at the end of Nox and the X at the beginning of the Sat?
Yeah.
Like, can they kind of blend together, or do you want to make sure there's a separation, or do you just kind of feel it? I don't know.
Yeah, I tend to make a separation. I think when people are speaking faster, it might blend together. But I'm at a point in my learning where I'm transcribing videos of elders speaking, and I feel like I hear where they end nach and begin chat, rather than make it one word like nachat. And I guess because of that, I like to make a space. I like to let people hear that it's 2 words. The reason I like to do that is that as I learn other people's clans and introduce other people in, for example, a language workshop or a warming of the hands ceremony where I'm introducing an elder, it won't be Khatsiti, I'll just say their clan. So if I'm introducing someone who's Kagwantan, I would say Kagwantan Nakhsiti or Kagwantan Nakhsiti. So noting in your mind that that has to be at the end of the Na or the Kagwantan, and that that's part of the end of that word, rather than being like, oh, it's just all one sound because Khat comes right after it. Khat doesn't always come right after it. And so I think for me and where I'm at in my learning, I do like to make separate sounds. Na Khatsiti.
Okay. Gunoti.
Good questions. Okay, I see a good question in the chat, and it says, so for my husband who is white and does not know where his family comes from, what could he say? And this is a good question too, because it makes us think about both like race, heritage, and ethnicity dynamics in culture. And so whereas in American culture, people tend to be classified by a concept of race, which is which color is your skin. Whereas in some Alaska Native cultures, you identify by connection to your ancestors and your ancestral land, which is more in line with heritage. And so that being said, you still, like, we're all at our own points in our learning. Like for a long time, I didn't know my mom was English and French American. I just knew she was white. But as I grew to learn about my own heritage and how to uplift my ancestors, how to acknowledge my privilege and acknowledge where I come from, and as my mom did her DNA test and found out where her ancestors were from, I think it's kind of leads to a lot of social healing in Alaskan society and American society, where we just honor where we come from. and try to bridge those communication gaps. But if you don't know where, if, for example, you're not native, you don't know where your ancestors came from, that's totally fine. You could say, he could say, Tleit Cha Chatziti. And what he basically would be saying is, I belong to the white people, or I am a white person. That Sati pattern is about being of a group. So you kind of say the group and then at the end of that group name and then Sati. Ayesh.
Yeah, you just answered my question. So, goodness Chief.
Okay. Yeah, when I started learning Tlingit, even though my family is Koyukon, it was important to me to identify through the Tlingit language when I started learning Tlingit, because it's just like going to any nation, you want to introduce yourself in the way that people understand. It's like about respect. But my first teacher was Kagwask Ishmael Hope. And so I came to class and said, Tleit Shawat Chatziti. I'm a white woman. And then I would say, which is I'm the child of the Athabascans. And he was like, it's not quite sitting right with me that you're saying you are a white woman. And so it kind of brings up this friction in viewpoints between saying like, I am the color of my skin versus like, I am this heritage. And so it just depends for me. It depends on my audience and who I'm talking to and how I identify. But since we're practicing the sounds and the verb patterns of these, this is how I'm introducing myself in this context. Okay. Good question in the chat. It says how to say or write if my mother is Skidegate Haida, and how to say and write my father is Irish. So the way I see this in the language, let me just take you there. So if you're from another nation, another native nation, and you want to know how to designate it in Tlingit, this online dictionary is a good resource. For folks that haven't been to it yet, you can go to clinkitlanguage.com, and then under the resources tab, go to dictionary. And anytime I'm searching online, I like to use the HTML version because it's easily searchable on your web browser. And then I go to the Tlingit side, which is the English to Tlingit to English translation. Okay, and I want to search. So I'm on a Mac. I'll go Command F. And I'll type in Haida, and I'll scroll through until I find the Tlingit word for Haida. And so one way to identify Haida, whether you want to say, use the Haida word, that's fine. If you wanted to say Kad Kil, you could say that, which is Haida for Haida. Or if you wanted to use the Tlingit word, like for example, if you're speaking to a circle of Tlingit elders and they know the word Dekina, you could use Dekina. Skidegate Haida, I don't know the word for it, but for example, one thing I might do is kind of keep scrolling through all the entries where the word Haida appears in English and kind of see what I come across. it's kind of fun. You can see like where there's loan words that were originally title words and kind of said with the Lingit pronunciation. So that's the best I can do for you. For Haida, I would say Deki na And the other part of your question was, how do I say my father is Irish? And I see people just using the English word Irish. Irish yedi ayechat. Okay, I'll demonstrate for you all 4 lines so that when you review these recordings, or if you want, you can review it. You can record it on your phone right now. But this will be our homework, is to practice these. And so I'll demonstrate them for you. Oh, sorry. Sorry. We keep the same pattern that we've been using. Okay. Okay, sorry. Leitchach einach ana yuchat duasak. Konanang einach nila toga yuchat duasak. Ingenen kwan nach chatsaki. Konana yedi ayachat. Any more questions on these before we wrap up for the day? Okay. So for homework, go ahead and practice these 4 lines. They're in the chat, they're up here. You can take a screenshot. I'll post them on our website to Rudy. And I would just encourage you to stick to these lines for now. Like I said, as you learn your house names, you can add information. As you learn to personalize it for your audience, you can adjust it. But for now, these are the lines we'll use for our self-introduction. And spend time on each word and sound. Something I'd like to drive home is that if you look at a word like einach and you're like, whoa, that's a mouthful, the natural tendency will be to kind of speed it up or skip over it. But the goal in your beginning stage is to be in that awkward space and get comfortable with it, because down the road, that's going to help you progress so that you're saying and not te, and nach instead of nuk, because you don't want to cut corners. You want to pronounce each sound. Okay, any questions before we wrap up? Screenshot.
I was wondering if there are recordings of kind of sound by sound. If they were mentioned earlier, I missed last week's classes, so if I missed them already, my apologies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a good question. Let me just put it in the chat right now. There's a YouTube video that I'll put in the chat so that you can practice. Uh, okay, here it is. Okay, so for folks who weren't able to make it to some of our previous classes, I just pasted a link in the chat. This is a video compiled by Rene. He's my Lingit language professor at UAS. And he makes space, he'll say a sound and make space for the learner to repeat. This is an excellent video. I would start with the vowels if you're not familiar yet with vowels, and then just spend a little bit of time, maybe like 5 to 10 minutes per period, just practicing the sounds. Good question. Are there any more? If not, it was wonderful seeing you today. You guys sound really good. I'm proud of your work and your pronunciation. And I hope you have an awesome rest of your day. We'll see you back here Thursday at 12 p.m.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good night, Cheech.
Peace.
Oh.